up? Well, Alan, we were practicing with no arrow. It's set at 0 on the front and rear. But we're probably going to start playing with it soon. Even though... Yeah. Right, okay. Yeah, well, let me know if you think it feels pretty stock, because I didn't really compare it, but I put it at the stock diff and the stock suspension as well, and then set the aerodynamic adjustment to 0 front and rear. It feels pretty much like the stock car, I think, but I didn't really try and back-to-back compare them. That's what I was curious of, if the mods would, you know, even though it says 0, is it really 0? Stock car is? Okay. So does it, I didn't even pay attention, PP changes with your downforce adjustment? I didn't even pay attention to that. Yeah. Yeah. Their card becomes ineligible. Yeah, I probably need to change this because I set the PP a little higher than what it was, but we may adjust over it. I feel like this track's a pretty good one because it has high speed and low speed, so you can kind of feel when the arrow is working and when it isn't. Yeah. I used to not really care for this track, but I kind of like it. Because it has the chicane. That was the other thing, since we're adding the suspension and diff, it'll be interesting once you add suspension, like how it handles the curves on that little bus stop chicane. And turn 1 is just a great aero track to have a long time to feel the balance of the car and that long sustained high-speed left-hander. Yeah, the mountains. But yeah, it'll be interesting once we add the suspension how it handles the curves, because you can ramp the curve pretty well right now and not upset the car too much, but stiffen the suspension too much and it'll launch off that curve, I'm sure. But yeah, if you guys want to, I figured we'd start with just putting the front downforce to max and then go out and drive the car. And what you'll find is it should basically be extremely oversteery. Let's put it at 100 and the rear at 0. And we'll just do a couple quick laps with yeah, it does go, it increases your performance point, even though it's probably maybe going to be harder to drive. I may have to change the event settings just to make sure. I set it at 500 performance points. So hang on a second while I change these so that we don't get invalidated. Alright. So you can just do a lap or two with full front downforce, and if you can make it a lap. So remember, it's not that there's less rear grip, it's just that there's that much more front grip. Which is kind of like the big thing to think about with understeer and oversteer. Sometimes you can counter that by removing grip or adding grip. It's not necessarily always just there's less grip on one side or the other. Yeah, so you add that front grip, and now you're like, oh, the car is loose. The car, the car is oversteery. It's like, well, it's not necessarily that it's missing rear grip. It just has too much front grip for the balance. Yeah, exactly. Aero, you're adding grip, fundamentally. Where you were just driving the car with no downforce, you'd be like, oh, it's fine. Now when I turn into turn one, the rear just steps out. It's got all this oversteer, and it's just because I can steer it. The front isn't anywhere near the limited grip, and the rear hits it much earlier, so. The car's still drivable, but you can feel that balance change. Especially in like the back section of the track with all the S curves, that's where it's like just really a drift car basically. For me at least, the car is still faster, even though it's more unpleasant to drive, maybe more difficult to drive. Yeah, you should feel that more direct front input from increased downforce. It'll kind of go where you point it. And obviously less of an effect at the low speed corners, but a much greater effect. Like when you go through that hairpin in the back of the track, and then you start going through the S's, it's just an immediate balance change to oversteer. And turn one is just, I can almost like keep the wheel pointed straight and the car rotates through the corner on its own. And when you're working on tuning a car, you just want to feel where the car is like naturally breaking away. Like if you're going through a sustained corner and the rear starts losing traction before the front, then you need more rear grip or less front grip, whichever. Like turn one here is a good example to just kind of figure out where the balance of the car is. If you brake and turn in and the back end just steps out, then you either need more rear grip or less front grip, depending on what category you're trying to fit the car into. Like they don't really implement it much in this game, but technically you can put like harder compound front tires on than rear, or like add a medium compound to the rear and a hard compound to the front and balance the car that way too. But most people like don't. Most of the time that's usually not allowed for one reason or the other. I think in the game, because in the game you can do front and rear compound differences, but usually it'll like say on one compound multiplier. Like in sport mode it disallows using like one compound on the front and the other one on the rear, because the rules will have like a mandatory 2 compounds, and originally people were, I think in GT Sport, people were like using the hards on the front and the hards on the rear and the mediums on the front to get around like doing a pit stop. They satisfied the rule requirements by having ran both compounds. So then they disallowed like running 2 different compounds. But like if you're just doing like single player, or maybe you're in a league that allows it, or an online series that allows it, then you can technically balance the car that way too. Alright. So now I'm going to do the opposite and take the front downforce to 0 and the rear to 100. And actually, I didn't pay attention to that. So if you look, it has a lower performance points value. So 100 rear is 82.7, 482.7, and 100 front and 0 rear is 496.19. But I think driving the car is faster with the rear downforce versus the front, so I wouldn't trust the performance points for everything. And really, it's only fast for 2 reasons: the braking stability, and I guess just natural stability all around. Like the high speed stability, the back end doesn't step out anymore. But one thing you'll notice is you can ride the brake into the braking zone and trail brake the car now, where you couldn't really do it as well with no downforce or the lack of front downforce. Like the car's not going to step out because you're still on the brake in the corner. Like going into this corner here, either of these, you can really like keep your foot on the brake and drag the brake and rotate the car. none of that back end just sliding out. But it may feel a little slower because the front doesn't want to grip, but you guys notice the difference? It's pretty significant for just 100 downforce points. Wow. You have to kind of adjust your line and your driving a little bit for it, but for me it's a lot easier to control just in general. I think there's a misconception about downforce too, that like at low speeds it doesn't do anything, or on like low horsepower cars it doesn't affect it. But I was looking at some data for the wing I have on my Miata, my real car, and at like 80 kilometers an hour it produces 100 pounds of downforce. So it's like, it's not just because the surface area, you know, increases that downforce number, and you wouldn't think like, you know, a little over, or not even 60 miles an hour, it is producing 100 pounds of downforce. But, no, I'm sorry, it was 80 miles an hour, it produces 100 pounds, not kilometers. But still, that's pretty significant. Right, yeah. I actually think, I have to look at it again, but I think like, it depends on the angle of attack of the wing too, because you can almost double the downforce at 100 miles an hour from like 0 degrees of angle of attack versus like 10 degrees. So it's like you'll go from like 100 at 0 degrees to 200 at 10 degrees at 100 miles an hour or something, so just the angle of the wing will double the downforce. I think part of it was the simplified understanding of aerodynamics at the time. They knew that worked. It had a lot of drag for those big wings, but they produced a lot of downforce. So like the lift to drag ratio, or the downforce to drag ratio, you know, on paper to modern standards was terrible. But that's why those cars had insane horsepower to make up for it. So they're just like, it's kind of like just hitting it with a sledgehammer, you know, like we know how to make massive amounts of downforce with these huge wings, and the car has a lot of drag, so just put a big turbo on it and you fix the drag problem that way, instead of, you know, modern like F1 and stuff where it's producing, you know, the lowest drag penalty possible with the highest downforce. And that's where you get like the multi-element wings and things like that keep the airflow attached while increase the downforce while still, you know, keeping a lot less drag than like a big, just, you know, canard or boxed in wing or something. Yeah, kind of same thing, right? It was just massive horsepower, a lot of downforce from just, I mean, on paper, like, if air hits a flat surface at 45 degrees, half of the force of the air goes into drag and half goes into downward pressure. You know, you just take the vector of that air hitting it. If it's hitting it at 45 degree, you know, wing, basically, your drag to lift ratio is like 1 to 1. Half of the air's pressure is slowing the car down and half of it's pushing it into the ground. And if you're like, well, I can just add a giant turbo or have a big V8, then I don't care. Kind of the same reason like you see a lot of autocross cars with just like big like spoilers on the rear, because they just need the downforce at low speeds and the drag penalty isn't as big of a factor at lower speeds, so you just need to scoop up a lot of air and use it to push the car into the ground. And yeah, I did a few laps. I'm already faster, which I feel like this is the much better setup than the full front, no rear setup, even though this is like 10 performance points less. Kind of just shows how performance points aren't really going to translate directly to like how the car is going to perform. It may be possible with the more front grip to drive the car a little faster, but it's too easy to overdrive the car in that configuration. Where in this configuration you can push it all the way to the limit, understeer, and know you're at the limit and still have stability. Or technically with more front grip you can get the car to rotate and possibly go through the corner faster, but if you step over it just a little bit, you lose all your... And the game doesn't really know the difference between the two, so it'll tell you the other one's the better setup. So if you're in like a race and it's performance limited, you may realize like, oh, I can actually take a performance point penalty and have a better setup because I'll just make the car understeer. It may not be on paper faster, but I know I can extract 100% of the grip out of it, drive it at the limit, and be more consistent as well, less likely to lose the rear end, make a mistake, all that. Like in all of our setups and races before we did, where we had cars that were really unstable in braking, this is basically the fix to it. Just rear downforce to keep the rear planted, reduce weight transfer to the front in the braking zone, and you're going to solve all your rear instability problems pretty quickly with this kind of setup approach. And it probably wouldn't take that much rear downforce, like 50 to 100. Alright, if everyone's happy with this setup now, we can do full downforce mode and see what that's like, and then after that we'll do a little bit of playing with adding the suspension and differential if we want. Or you can just play with tweaking the downforce settings and try and find the balance that feels best for you. Because I bet we'll all kind of pick different numbers, you know. Because technically you may want to think like, oh, I can just do 100 to 100. So 100 is 491, but 100 in rear 0 is 496. So it's actually lower performance points to have max downforce. So let's see what the lap times say though. And the car should feel more neutral with this setup. And if you feel like the car is too loose, I would just like slowly dial a little bit of the front downforce out until it feels like comfortable to drive, or if you feel like it needs more oversteer, just slowly dial out the rear. Because the downforce is going to have like the biggest influence on car balance. And then I think we talked about it the other week when we did suspension tuning, is like on the hairpins in the low speed corners and going over the curves, the springs and the dampening and the suspension tuning. This should be a decent lap time improvement already. My first full lap. 6, almost 7 tenths faster. And I missed the first apex. Passing B-shift, exiting the pits. So for me, I think the car is a little easier to overdrive with full front rear downforce, but it's overall faster. It's just a little more neutral. But if you have problems with like managing the oversteer or the rear grip, A little less front downforce probably help. Or like if the trail braking is then destabilizing the car for you too much, then just remove some front downforce until it feels more stable. It's definitely unstable in some areas now. Yeah, I'd say this is just a little bit biased to oversteer with the 100-100, so I thought it was interesting. Also, I was looking at the Porsche GT3 RS, and they were saying they were trying to maintain a 30% front, 70% rear aero balance, so that car is designed to have, obviously it's rear engine, so it's a little different, but 30% of that downforce is in the front, 70% in the rear, to give it a neutral handling. On a front engine rear wheel drive car, it's probably still something more rear biased, but not as much. So yeah, I'd probably do like 20%. Like like 80 front, 70 front, 100 rear. So this is about as far as I got testing. I didn't really play with it beyond just making sure that the downforce levels produced a noticeable difference in handling. Test out 60% front, 100 rear, and feel free to start doing any kind of tuning adjustments you can or want to now that we've kind of identified all the different extremes. And hopefully you can better identify like what direction you need to go if the car is doing a certain thing, whether understeer or oversteer, or less stable in the braking. the things you can really notice on this track with stock suspension is, even though the car has more grip and is balanced well, you still have to kind of turn in and transition, especially on like the S section in Sector 2, much more gently, because you can't really like throw the car in too quickly or change direction too quickly, or else it still becomes unstable. Where if we add suspension and kind of stiffen the suspension or play with the sway bars, you can transition the car a lot faster in those sections with the stiffer suspension. So that's kind of how it complements the aero to reduce the weight transfer between kind of the left and right hand turns, or turn in weight transfer. So those are the areas you kind of want to be focused on with like anti-roll bars, for example. Like how the car handles like left-right transitions, like really quick changes in direction. Oh, nice. Yeah. You guys want? Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm gonna go ahead and do like full tuning, throw the suspension on, and start seeing how the car handles with everything combined. Right. Well, we were talking about that when we first got on, the fact that, first of all, we're adding a splitter and a diffuser. We don't have a big rear wing, which a diffuser generally creates very little, if no, drag penalty on a car. Especially when you're going from like a road car to a car with downforce, or like adding downforce to a road car, because a road car by default generates lift or no downforce. And now suddenly you're adding downforce, you're usually reducing drag at the same time. So a lot of times those road cars actually like top speed with the drag reduction and increased downforce, because it's not just downforce is bad. You have to also consider if the car had lift creates drag too. So you could create a ton of drag and a ton of lift. That would just be like throwing a wing on the car upside down. It would create a lot of drag and no downforce, right? It would try to get the rear of the car off the ground. So your top speed would be worse, and the car would have less grip on top of that. So you can't always just look at it as downforce equals more drag. It's totally dependent on what's creating the downforce, whether you're improving like reducing drag on the bottom of the car and increasing downforce that way, then you're reducing drag and reducing lift, which is a net gain in downforce or grip with a net reduction in drag at the same time, you know, so. We were talking about it, I thought I needed to do a test where I do, like, the way the car's set up now with 100 rear downforce with the diffuser, and then throw, like, the race wing on it, and then test it with 100 downforce at, like, high-speed ring, or not high-speed ring, but, like, special stage rear X, and see, like, what the top speed difference is, if it's slower with the wing, with 100 downforce versus the rear diffuser. I mean, if they did it extremely accurately, it should technically be more drag with the wing versus the diffuser, but I have yet to test it. It would be an interesting test to find out. So we also realized that the full diffuser, or I realized, I don't know if anyone else knew this, the full diffuser increases or gives you front and rear downforce increase, or at least adjustment, because it's a full like floor upgrade, I guess. It's not just the rear diffuser increases the downforce in the front axle as well, so like it's a full under tray setup. So that means it's giving you both for one modification versus a rear wing, which is only going to give you rear. The other thing to be interesting to test in this game is if you can possibly create front lift instability with a rear wing. Because on some cars, when the rear is compressed, it actually pitches the front up more and creates, or you know, the rear gets lower than the front, and it creates that reverse brake. And then you actually get front lift from having reverse brake set up. Yeah, that's kind of basically what contributed to that. It was more that it just came over a hill and it got enough front lift to scoop up a bunch of air under the car and turn it into an airplane, but I don't think it was directly because of too much rear causing positive brake. It was just, there used to be a huge hill at Le Mans, they shaved it down. I think that car just happened to just have a little too much front lift or front ride height or some scenario that created that. So I want to pay attention. I put the suspension on in the rear diff and didn't change anything, and I'm like slower, like a second slower. Yeah, that was my initial impression, is that harder to control, stiffer. Some corners it feels better, but a lot of corners it feels unstable. I didn't adjust anything, I just threw it on. And again, you always have to consider, like, yeah, I'm a second slower. Like aftermarket suspension or the diff, you know, you don't know what kind of final modifications those are expecting when they set like the default settings. It's not like they set it to where like, oh, you're putting aftermarket suspension on the car and no aero and no other modifications, or you putting aftermarket suspension on a car with like wide body, full aero, and 1,000 horsepower or something, you know, an engine swap. But they come with the same default suspension tuning, no matter which one it is. So you really can't, like, assume the default is gonna do you any favors at all. Yeah, the car's, like, extremely unstable at higher speeds. The S's, it's really, yeah, the S's in Sector 2 are really bad. And it's, yeah, just natural oversteer. But the interesting thing is you could say, okay, do I need to readjust the suspension, or do I change the downforce bias to counteract the suspension? Right, you got two ways to deal with it now, so it's like, which one's actually going to solve my problems? Or is it the differential locking? I don't think it's the differential. Like, probably rear... I'll finish this lap, but I don't think it's that good. Yeah, I'm just like massively off pace now. Even though the car has more performance points, you know. Not a bunch more, but a little bit more. So it has stiffer rear suspension than front from default. 1.5 front, 1.65 rear. And the suspension gives you more front camber, so more front grip. And overall stiffer. I think I'm going to put it more like even out the front and rear spring rate. And the interesting thing is I'd like to take like more of the rear toe out now that it's got more rear downforce, so may also like soften the rear sway bar a couple points. Let's see what that does. It's interesting, the rear diff by default is 50 initial torque, 80 acceleration sensitivity, and 0 braking. Seems interesting. You can even set the acceleration sensitivity that high with the customizable one. The interesting thing here is the suspension at like 2 hertz, like the curbs will just like instantly spin you if you hit those curbs, the big red ones. So if I set it back down to like 1.5, 1.6, you can just launch over the curb, no problem. So the rear diff, I think, does contribute to the instability. I lowered it and it seems a little better. Even though the stock one on this car is like 50 initial torque in the front and 80 in the 50 initial torque, 80 acceleration, which you can't even adjust the fully customizable one to that level. So yeah, I'm not sure if that number is realistic or what's going on there, but for me it seems like the normal kind of rear diff settings, like 5 initial torque and like 10 to 15 acceleration seem, yeah, now I'm suddenly faster. So I don't know if you heard me, I tried to do like 2 natural frequency front and rear, and when you hit the sausage curves you just like instantly spin. So I put it all the way back down to like stock, basically, like 1.5 in the front, 1.6 in the rear, and you can ride the curbs and you can play with like the sway bars to kind of adjust the suspension stiffness. I think that's better, because like the downforce helps with the front and rear pitch, like it helps eliminate front and rear weight transfer, so you don't need to use springs to compensate for that, like we've done in other practices. Like with the Z, we really had to play with spring rates to keep the weight transfer in line. But you know, if we could go back and redo that and add downforce, we could compensate for the weight transfer with the downforce, and then just have softer springs to handle curbs and use sway bars to handle kind of roll stiffness. So that's how you kind of intertwine those those things together, so like I said, if you were running a car with no downforce, then you're totally dependent on springs. And if you have downforce, and maybe like here, you have downforce, but you have these huge curbs you have to deal with in one section of the track. So you need to run a softer spring just to be stable through there, because it leads onto the straightaway, so it's an essential corner to be able to take and not get upset by the curve. And that kind of goes with like really analyzing like the track layout and how specific like parts of the car's performance will be essential in what areas. You know, where do you need downforce? Where do you need, you know, soft suspension for like rough curves or instability over bumps, or where you need stiff suspension for, you know, high-speed transitions. Yeah, or if you're just on a track that has like relatively smooth track, not a lot of bumps or elevation, not really aggressive curves, then you can say, okay, I can run stiffer suspension here because, you know, I'm not dealing with these issues. But like if you're at the Nürburgring, you probably don't want super stiff suspension. It's like the giant curves that you could potentially hit and just launch the car into the air. Yeah, exactly. No real big curbs. Right. Yeah, I like that portion. If you can take that quickly, it's a good... Right. Yeah. Yeah, you know, if you can gain speed out of the Porsche curves, then that may benefit you. Or even just the first and second chicane on the Mulsanne straight. You know, if you're like, okay, I'm going to run really low drag, so low downforce, but then you're like getting loose exiting onto the Mulsanne straight, well then what did you really gain with your low downforce setup? Because you're unstable going on to the longer straights, and you're not maximizing your exit speed. So your compromise has to be, how can I get the most stable and consistent exit onto the straightaway and also net the highest straight line speed. And we were talking about at the beginning too, you know, if you're in a race, you may be thinking, okay, well, if I'm in the draft, then my downforce can benefit me if I can stay in the draft of somebody, and then I can beat them in the last sector. You know, I can actually just follow second place the whole race, knowing I've got grip in my pocket in the final sector, and use the slipstream to not pass them, but just stay behind them and then push them on the very last lap for the overtake, and then have the advantage in the last sector. That's like some deep race strategy probably for that track. And you may have better tires for it too. You know, you may have more tire left, because I haven't tested that either. That'd be an interesting thing to test. If I take like this car and I run like a 153 with no say I have no downforce on the car at all, and I run a 155, we'll say that. I ran a 153 with 100 downforce. Okay, well what if I put all the downforce on it and I try and target a 155? Like, how much better are my tires after 10 laps or something by underdriving the car with downforce versus driving at the limit with no downforce or a low drag setup? And can you technically like save tires by having a car that has more grip, but you're just not utilizing it until you need it, you know, or you can run longer into the race with a higher downforce setup. It may not be fastest on the straights, but what if it, I don't know the race you guys are doing, if it has pit stops or not, but you know, you may consider sacrificing drag if you can optimize your tire wear with more downforce to keep the car more stable and reduce sliding. Well, you're reducing the. That's why I'd be interested to test. And intuitively, it shouldn't really increase tire wear. Is my initial thought, because you're reducing scrub. Because you're pressing, like you said, you're pressing the tire into the ground more, and you're reducing the slip of the tire. And in theory, if you were more concerned with just pace, you could underdrive the car a little bit more and use the downforce to just take care of the tires rather than just all-out pace. The funny thing is, I'm not improving with all the extra mods. I'm starting to go back to maybe I should just default tune the car. I'm nowhere close to my fastest lap on full 100% front rear suspension or downforce with stock suspension and diff. But now I basically set the spring rates and the damping back to the stock level, and I'm trying to use the, you know, now that I have front camber adjustment, I'm trying to use that to add a little bit more front grip and reduce the front downforce. Try and compensate with the front camber change, because it only had like half a degree stock, so I should be able to bring the front downforce down quite a bit, add like 2.5 degrees of camber, and hopefully it has a little bit better front. And I put the toe back in the rear because it just seems still too unstable without it. And like stock spring rates, but stiffer sway bars. Oh yeah. gonna get the undercut. The switch back. Oh, you're backing out? Okay. Well, that would have been a good move. I was gonna let you take it. There he goes. Alright, I think this will be an improvement. We'll see. It's crazy how much the stock suspension handles the sausage curve versus just a little bit more stiffer springs. It just launches you into an uncontrolled spin. Basically, the tires just fly off the ground. You just instant spin. It's so close to being good. Oh yeah. Yeah, I was jumping the sausage curve. The most impressive thing is that's totally you can hold the car together. You can stay your foot in it with the stock suspension and launch off that curb, and it's pretty easy to keep it together. But if you try and hit those in a GT3 car, it's deadly. yeah, I think the goal of this car is to use as much front downforce as you can handle and try and get the rear as stable as possible with as much front downforce. At least with the settings we have, like the setup we have, that's... Although you probably can't, so you can't like use other methods besides aero to add understeer, because aero is such a significant portion of the balance, so it's probably easier to... I think I have it at like 70 front right now, 100 rear. I haven't beat my best time, but just aero and nothing else, so... Oh yeah. That'd be something good to practice probably with like the Sophie AI, just follow them. Really is a practice, yeah. Run whatever view you used to and just practice like following them and looking just completely through their car, because that's basically what you do. Like, it's easier probably with VR if you, I don't know if you use VR, but because with the 3D it's easier to kind of change your focus through a car than like on the 2D screen where it's just right there. I had a practice I attempted, and you can do this too, where you literally just like hang a towel over the center. Well, if you're on a 2D screen instead of VR, hang a towel over the center like section of your screen, and try and drive a lap with the center section of your screen completely blocked, like just using the outside edges of the track to place your car, like on a time attack, you know. And if you can do that, then you can tell yourself, like, okay, I can follow somebody who's right in front of me, and I can, you know, sight my way around a track without being dependent on that clear view through them that you're not going to get. Alright, that was a faster lap, so got a better setup. Actually, I think this one can now get some front downforce back. Oh, it's at 60. Yeah, we'll go like 75. In like a few minutes, we can do a few races, see where we're at, or share some tuning comparisons. And yeah, I think the important thing to take away is like tuning for a specific track and understanding what that tune is doing there, you know. Whether it's high downforce or it's a tune to like handle heavy curves or something, or low drag. and then try and like, eventually you can kind of make educated guesses on other tracks. You know, like you said, Catalonia, last sector with the chicane, kind of the same scenario as here. So I'm gonna guess if your car handles these scripts pretty well, it'll handle those scripts pretty well too. Ah, no problem. You too. Yeah, improved, but only like a few tenths. Yeah, so like this car kinda, how well it does on stock suspension, you know, I may consider just sacrificing the adjustment if I was racing in it and using the stock suspension to give me more performance points for some other area. I mean, I can maybe eke a little bit out, but honestly, the stock suspension on this is good enough. That's why I try and like kind of say like, we'll start stock and build. No matter what you're adding, you know, always go back and add that single thing with the stock as a baseline, and then it's a sanity check to make sure you're like, well, my performance points are higher, so I obviously have a faster car, right? It's like, it felt easier to drive still with the stock setup. Yeah, I'm still not faster. I'm still, I mean, it felt limited, but it's manageable. Where now it's just more, it's because the tires too, I think, the sport hards. So that's the other thing to consider. Like, you want the car to be really compliant on the harder compound. Because now it feels like it has a lot of grip, but it just breaks away a lot faster with the stiffer suspension and everything. It just doesn't like have that like nice gradual change in traction that it had before. Maybe I'll drastically change the rear diff and see if that makes a difference. I mean, I've never done direct comparisons, but I'm suspecting like maybe the stock diff is just better than the fully custom diff. Yeah, well that's the weird thing, like if I set this at like 60, it feels too loose, but where that at 80 felt fine. So I don't even know what the numbers on stock stuff actually represent. Or if it has to do with like how they set the difference between like a one-way or a two-way or a fully customizable. Because maybe a two-way diff is going to be better. Who knows? I haven't done, you know, just because you get more things to adjust doesn't mean those adjustments help you, because like with the fully customizable one, I feel like now I have it on 5 initial torque and 10 acceleration, and it feels better. But it's still a little loose on those last, like, combination of right-handers. I think by the end of this I'll find that I can just run faster laps with more understeer. Curve got you on. I just straddle it. That's like the easiest way, is just straddle both of them completely with the car. Even with the track limits, it won't cause the track limits to straddle it, so. This track's definitely a good track for aero testing, because like half the track I'll be like, oh yeah, the car feels really good, and then I get to the last sector and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Because it's kind of got every speed corner to go through in transitions and everything. I was gonna say, yeah, Suzuka's good, but again, that's only like kind of one kind of corner to a transition between corners. I guess like here you get the curves too to test on. Yeah. I think you want to kind of feel the car at low speed, mid speed, high speed, and like here, turn 1 just gives you a really good like balance, aero balance check, because you can really feel it through a long sustained corner at a high speed. I'm gonna have, yeah, if I'm gonna have understeer or oversteer. And then if you can handle the sausage curves, you're like, okay, my suspension's compliant enough. And then you have kind of the low speed. Okay, I'm up on the first sector, so this one must be an improvement. Even though I feel like it's worse than stock suspension still. My car understeers at low speed now, so I need to fix the tuning for the low speed sections more. Feels good in the mid and high speed, but just needs a little more front grip or less rear. Few tenths, quarter second faster. A little stiffer rear, I guess. Guys are ready, you can either share our setups and do a little 3-person race. Not that many people, but I think it'd just be interesting to see kind of where people landed on their setups and how they feel about them. I think it's always interesting. I think this is a better way of like learning to tune cars than just like reading someone's setup on a forum and copying it, you know. Because the idea is you need to set up around your driving ability. You know, if you're not that good at trail braking, set up a car that has really, really good rear stability so that, or braking stability so that trail braking is just easier. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I made a couple tweaks. I stiffened the rear suspension just a little bit, added a little bit more front downforce just to try and bias it back towards a little bit of better turn-in. It's not perfect, but Bishop, how you doing? I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm struggling to find much improvement with the diff or the suspension. I don't really, I mean, I can tell that I have more adjustability, but to get it to where I want it, I put most of the stuff closer to the stock settings. at least on the suspension side, yeah, I'm still not that much of a gain. I think maybe less than half a second, which I could probably improve a half a second on just practice with the stock setup, so. I think a more understeery aero balance just helps with being able to put the power down without the rear stepping out, and that is an overall net gain than having a car that's more neutrally balanced. So this car feels fun to drive, but I don't think it's faster because I can't just get into the throttle and let the front scrub. I think I'm just going to throw the stock diff on it now and leave the suspension. So I think the off throttle is better with the stock diff, with like an open decel or like 0. I mean, the diff just isn't good. I mean, I think they're more important on like the front wheel drive cars, or if you just get like wheel spin, like, or inside wheel spin or something, then you need a diff. But yeah. From the custom setting, or yeah, I turned them all down to stock. I did do a big diff change to try and see if I could replicate the stock diff, and I trimmed the initial torque all the way up to 50. It's definitely loose, but it does feel a little more manageable. I don't know. It feels better than having it low, so maybe kind of some of the testing we did the other day is kind of reversed on rear-wheel drive versus front-wheel drive. I still don't fully get like the differential settings between front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive and how they affect handling. It definitely has more oversteer, but it's much more manageable oversteer. It's like really gradual. But yeah, I don't know. So I didn't really fully settle, but I had the ride height with the fully customable suspension at 105 front and rear. I didn't change that. I brought the anti-roll bars down to 2 front and rear. And damping ratios, 25 front, 25 rear on compression, 35 front, 35 rear on expansion, which is like the stock value. And 1.5 natural frequency in the front, 1.65 rear, which is stock, and then 2 degrees front camber, 2.5 rear, and then 2 degrees toe in. But yeah, now I'm kind of confused with the diff. Still don't fully understand what's a good diff setting. I don't remember what setting I had when I set that fastest lap either, but I still kind of maintain that the stock suspension and diff may be able to match that. That's kind of the interesting thing too. It's like the default suspension setup feels worse than stock by far, and then the diff feels worse. And only if you put a lot of time into tweaking and adjusting them are you probably going to actually benefit from them. So yeah, I mean, like, I would probably not put adjustable suspension, like the full adjustable suspension on a car without the intention of putting some effort into tweaking it. Otherwise, you're probably better off with stock, you know. Unless you know the stock is just causing problems. Like, if it's not a sports car like this, obviously, it's gonna need probably more work. The diff is just unstable oversteer. Oh, you guys ready for a quick race, I guess? Probably just do one and call it a night since there's not a big group. How many laps do you think? Yep, should be just over, I think. I'm tempted to just put stock suspension on the car. Yeah. No, I'll put it kind of back to like what I had that was decent. But it doesn't feel as good off throttle corner entry like with the stock diff. It's mainly the diff. The stock diff, it just off throttle, it rotates so much better. With this one, it really understeers. Although the description for braking sensitivity says increase it will increase the risk of understeering. But I tried to have it low and I didn't really feel an improvement there. So anyway. Oh, I'm in the BRZ and you guys are both in FRSs, huh? Wide? You guys want to go 3 wide? Alright. The double switcheroo. Although I almost T-boned Bishop turning in. See the stability of my car at this stage. Missed the apex by a mile. Oh, this setup feels pretty good. Like I said, 5 initial torque on the diff and 15 accel and 15 decel. The difference is just you can't drive the car as hard as you could on the stock suspension. Like it was more compliant, so you have to be a little easier on the throttle. Sacrifice some the ability to kind of throw the car around and still keep it together. It's always something you kind of have to decide when you're tuning something. It's like, do I need to adjust my driving? Yeah, that was a 153.0. That's the best lap I've ran, and I missed the apex on turn 1, so. And I literally changed settings before we started the race. I just changed them and started it. I didn't even. Could also just be more focused. set to 4 laps. That's alright. I don't know if I set a faster lap on the last one. I messed up the last corner. I was up, but... No, yeah, I just ran a 53,007. Yeah, with this setup, which I think the only things I changed were, yeah, it's still 75 front, 100 rear downforce, all the same suspension settings. I put the diff at 5 initial torque, 15 accel, 15 decel sensitivity. It feels okay. It's still a little loose, but you have to be gentler on the throttle. I think that's the challenge. You can just put the throttle down a lot earlier with like the default setups, the stock diff and the stock suspension, and you're only dealing with downforce, so it's just easier to kind of tune it to what works and then go with it. Where when you add all the extra elements, you're struggling with, am I going the right direction or not, you know? Because what if I change this? I gain, or I drop performance points, so... Yeah, you too. Thanks for coming. Even though I kind of plan these out, I always end up learning something, even doing them myself, so... I'm gonna real quick before I sign off do if I set my settings back to the original fastest lap setup, will I be faster now that I've practiced, you know? Always gotta do was it tuning or was it I just got faster? The car just has so much, feels like it just has more grip. And when you turn in off brakes, it just pivots, it just rotates. I mean, it slides a little, but... Yeah, like, just turn into the hairpin, and it's just so much more crisp, and it just wants to turn. But it still has like a nice bit of like understeer where you can just throw the car in the S's and it doesn't want the rear to go. Yeah, if you miss it, right, yeah, exactly. Like, the closer to the stock settings with this car right now, definitely, for me at least, essential for the curbing. Also, I mean, I know Aero compresses the suspension in this game, but for like actual bottoming out issues of cars and stuff doesn't seem as bad in this game than it is in maybe like other sims or in real life. So I'm not too concerned, because like really your concern with soft suspension is like, oh, it compresses too much and then you bottom out. You know, you kill your travel by the car being compressed, but doesn't really seem to be an issue, especially with how little downforce we're adding. It's not significant. kind of funny at the beginning. I thought it had a little bit of oversteer with like 100, 100 downforce with the stock settings, but now it feels like understeer compared to the diff and suspension edition. And like last like multiple apex right-hander, you can just get on the power so much easier and the back doesn't ever step out. Like I don't know how to replicate that with the tuning. Yeah, no problem. I don't know if I don't really have anything planned for any more of these, but we'll see what Wonka wants to do if he's wanting to come back and do some. Yeah, this is more of just kind of a tangent series of, I felt like it was something people probably, especially with the leaks and stuff, wanted to cover, so. Alright, that was a 53063 on stock suspension and stock diff. And 100, 100. And it's easier to drive the car too. Like the car's just easier to drive. So I don't really know what that means, but I'm pretty sure I can go faster. Let's see. This is probably faster. No, the curb got me. I don't think this is faster, but I can improve that. I think I can improve this easier than I'm only 200ths down. And if I do a better hairpin, I probably... Nah. Yeah, I can run a 52 probably with this setup. I don't know. It'd be a lot harder with all the tuning I tried to do. Because you can just throw the car around and it doesn't oversteer. You can get back on the throttle, even while it's still like sliding a little bit. Yeah, I don't think there's much of an advantage. I don't know. It's weird that something's up with the tuning. Maybe it's just these cars, but maybe an improvement. I mean, if I run a similar lap 2 laps in a row, it at least tells you it's consistent. That was a 53083. And yeah, like, not a great, like, there's still lap time, I know, so it's kind of, this is the best setup I've found so far. Like if you were limited to like this, yeah, this is 1.7 up, almost 2 tenths up. So. And like I don't really feel any faults that I'm like, oh, I need to adjust the suspension this or that. I would say maybe I would once I've compared it to the suspension, now I'm, you know, like I would rather just have this than. But then you have like the height adjustable suspension. Maybe you know, could play with that. I'm 3 tenths up, second sector. You know, the other like sports suspension options could, you know, you can lower the ride height but keep everything else, you know. Or, I mean, I'm not in any like tuning leagues, but it is interesting for, you know, things to know about. Especially like if we did a league that was like just a PP limit or something, and then it's open tuning and modding. There we go, 52.755. So yeah, like quarter second faster than anything else with just stock suspension, 100/100 wing, and nothing else. Now, the interesting thing is like how many mods do I have to do to the car if I don't do tires and I don't do engine? What do I have to do to the car to beat that? Right? Like if I add suspension, if I add, do I need, and then add brakes, I guess. There's really nothing else we can do. Transmission, you know, speed up, yeah, brakes, transmission. Like what else do I have to do to match stock part lap times? So it's definitely, yeah, you wouldn't think that. You think, oh, just add this upgrade. It upgrades the car. Now this may not apply, you know, to some other car. It might be totally different. So it's, you know, like a 240 SX or Sylvia or something may have huge benefits from the suspension because the stock suspension is so like soft. But that's why you gotta kind of address it all methodically instead of just throwing a bunch of mods on and start tuning, you know. Yeah, right, exactly. That's yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. It's like that car clearly better with suspension upgrades and mods. This car, on its surface, the suspension doesn't really do much to improve on the factory suspension, which is already very good, or the stock setup. So right. Yeah, or it needed less. I mean, obviously the Aero makes it way faster. I can't remember, I think I was running 54s, 55s without Aero, so, you know, it's a couple seconds faster with the Aero, which sounds about right. It kind of shows you, like, what if you could do, you know, limited mods, what's going to improve lap time the most? Well, tires and Aero probably are your first two things. Everything else, you know, then maybe, like, braking. Straight line performance, but all right, I think I'll end it there. Thanks for sticking around. Yeah, we can discuss maybe to do something else next week. I don't know. See if anyone has any. Maybe we can just do like GT4 tuning or something, and just get the GT4 cars and just gotta try and combine all of this and do some test and tuning. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's all available. It comes with a tune. and then you have to determine, is that tune the fastest? Is it the fastest for your ability, or is it the fastest for that particular track you're going to run at, right? So there's kind of 3 questions, because it's always going to be a combination of what's, what like is a esports driver going to run, and what is your ability, and what do you need to change from that to make it drivable for you, because yeah, right. Yeah, 2 tracks there. Like, I mean, like you could just say something like, Suzuka to Monza are going to be totally different. You know that you're going to, Monza's all low drag, good chicane, curb. I mean, you can already start thinking about how you would, from this, how you would change the car. You'd be like, okay, like Suzuka, I may have stiffer suspension and a lot of downforce. And then as soon as I go to Monza, it's like, okay, soft springs for these curbs, low downforce. I just need good braking stability, good curb riding ability, and the rest is just straight line. So, and you may be worse like in Parabolica or something, but you're like, well, as long as the car's fast out of every chicane, it may be just faster and easier to drive. So, anyway, that concludes it. So, in my stream.